Hello and welcome to today's episode of Courage Permission Slip. I am your host, Kia, and this episode we're doing something a little different. Today is the debut of Courage Permission Slip After Hours. And this was actually a brainchild that came up after the recording ended with a few guests because there were some topics that were surfaced in those conversations, and there was a huge desire to want to continue that conversation and dig a little deeper. And that's exactly what today is. After Hours is a casual conversation with previous guests where we will dive a little deeper into similar themes that popped up in those conversations. And there was a lot of energy that came up. So for our premiere episode, I invited back my previous guests, Christa Shelton and Jess, and we are going to explore some themes that came up in those conversations. But before we get started, I want to give you just a little teensy refresher on these two dynamo women. Christa is a certified personal trainer and behavior change specialist, and Jess is a career coach and consultant. Welcome back to the show, ladies.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for being willing to be my guinea pigs for this. I've been looking forward to this and I've been thinking about this for months. And so I'm excited that we get to do this today. And given that excitement, I would love to really dig into, there were two topics, two themes that came up in each of your conversations, which by the way, our interviews that we all had together were like one right after the other, like just within like 24 or 48 hours. So it was alive for me in the conversation, but then it was respectively, it was alive for the two of you. So the two themes that came up that I was interested in exploring further with the two of you was the first of, when you have that aha moment or that realization that something needs to shift, it's remembering that you don't have to take or make a move right away. Right? Like it's just because you have the aha moment, it doesn't mean that like bang zoom, you've got to jump into doing something with that right away. And the second theme, which was really like I saw an emotional reaction from the two of you as we were talking through this, is this idea or this prompt of who were you before the world told you who you should be? And Christa, you brought it up proactively. Jess, it came up for you. I heard you talk about something in your conversation and I just like slid in the question at the end. So those were two themes that stood out to me. And I'm curious, just before we dive into the two of them, for the two of you, as you think about those two themes, like, is there anything that stands out in particular that you have a lot of energy around right off the bat?
I thought it was just really powerful question when you slipped in that question in my podcast episode, and you're like, I heard you kind of talk around this. I'm just going to ask it. It hit me in the gut. And then I listened to Krista's episode and heard her, talk about that topic a little proactively as well. And I'm excited to dive back into it because I think there's a lot there. And also that second topic about, having that aha moment and then feeling like we can take a pause. And that's a theme that's honestly come up a lot in my coaching sessions over the last week or so. So I think there's definitely something going on, and there's some conversations about that too.
Yeah.
Christa, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. But I guess I would agree with that. But then I also think that there is a point where you do have to do something. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like in terms of like, and obviously, clearly we know that, but I think just figuring out, okay, how much time do I give myself before I do something? Because Jess, you just mentioned that, something had come up with, thinking about like your clients, and that theme is something that's been coming up a lot, where it's like, you don't want to ever be in a position where you're trying to push somebody to do something they're not comfortable doing or they're not ready to do. But there has to come a point where it's like, okay, you do have to take some sort of action. Yeah, I mean, that'd be like initially when you have it, but making a choice of like, okay, when exactly am I going to at least do one small thing to move toward it? Like figuring out that space in between.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's start there because, Christa, you've been in deep reflection and introspection anyway, right? And you are very much like, a mover and a shaker in that regard, where you tune into something and then you do take those measured steps to take action. And, as in your work as a personal trainer, but then also as a behavior change specialist, obviously that is something that is a hallmark of what you do. And Jess, I mean, which by the way, you and I were like, we should have a whole conversation about this. Here it is.
Here it is.
and you too, Jess, you had several moments, and I remember you were talking about like these career experiments that you were digging into at the time. And it was that reading that book by Angela Duckworth, Grit, where that was the click for you. So, and then obviously you have taken a series of steps and pivots in your career over the years. And so let's start there. Like, how, when you're working with your respective clients on the revelation or the aha moment or the click, whatever you want to call it, and then the shift to action, whether it's the shift to pause and get more information and then start taking those like actual steps. How do you support your clients through that? What's the process that you go through to deciding when that right moment is, or what that first step is?
Christa, do you want to start?
I was going to ask you, Jess, do you want to start?
Sure, I can jump in. So I'm thinking about the challenges, I think, that come up and get in the way of going from the light bulb, to taking action. And this is what's been coming up in my coaching sessions in the last couple of weeks. And I think one of them is around, we're just a generation if we want immediacy. And so there has to be sort of a negotiation with yourself and a realization that it's great that now I know where I'm going to go and I have more clarity, but I have to be open to taking a step and recognize that most of the time that step isn't going to get me to where I decided now I want to go, but that's okay. And I think something magical that happens that and maybe I'm having a hard time articulating it to my clients, is when you can take that first step in that direction, all of a sudden there becomes new options and possibilities from that step forward that we couldn't see when we started. Right. And so that's why it's so important. And I want to hear Christa talk about this too. That's why it's so important to just take a step forward. You have to like move, because opportunities will open up and realizations and more information will open up once you get to that point. And that was, a couple aha moments I'm having with my clients, where I'm just trying to get them to say, what is the smallest next step that you can take? And I bet once you go there, you'll learn more information. You may gain a little more confidence or feel like the risk is a little bit less and feel open to taking one more step. But if I try and push you off the boat and to just jump in that water, I mean, I'm going to get a lot of kicking and screaming and resistance. So those are two things that come to mind for me just in working with clients lately. What's resonating for you, Christa?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would agree the same thing. That just taking that one small step. But I think sometimes there's just a lot of weight that's put on that one small step. And I think it's also like trying to pick apart and peel back the layers to what the resistance is around even taking a small step, and really getting to the bottom of that. Because I think, well, at least I can say in a personal experience and working with someone, there's a lot of judgment that's coming up, judgment and fear that's coming up around even the small step. So then it's like taking the time to peel back the layers to get to the root of what the fear is around that. Because a small step may seem like, okay, well, it's a small step, but it is loaded with all of these judgments and self-criticisms and imposter syndrome. If it's shrouded in that, even that one step, then that makes that one step seem like it is a huge leap, right? So I think it's really also taking the time to peel back the layers to get to the truth of what's actually happening there, to even get the small steps happening, because I'm trying to work with a client to get to that just one small step. And there's a lot of judgment and a lot of fear. And we're trying to really peel that back, because if that's there, then yeah, it makes it very hard to even do the smallest thing. So I think it's also like being honest with yourself about, you know, what's really underneath that, what's really going on that's keeping you like paralyzed from doing anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
Christa, do you hear, and Jess, I'm curious if you can chime in on this too. Do you notice any consistent themes with the judgment and the resistance? I mean, which obviously that comes up a lot on this show about the fears that people have and what they have to give themselves permission to do. But do you notice any consistent, normally reoccurring themes about or what that judgment and fear and resistance is wrapped in?
Absolutely. I know that it is definitely the fear of what other people are going to think about them. That's it. That's really where I think it stems from, is the judgment of like, well, what if this is not good enough? What are people going to say? Are people going to think I'm unprofessional? It's not going to look like what other people are doing. It's generally encased in what they think other people are going to be thinking about what they're doing.
Yeah. And I would add to that, because you're absolutely right that there's a judgment, and it's judgment from external and themselves as well. And it's tied up to identity, I think, is a big part of it. You sometimes have to shift that identity, or let go of a piece of an identity, or detach yourself a little bit from an old identity. And I think something else that I noticed as well is there's almost like a fear of ruining the fairy tale. So it's tied to this idea of fear of failure. But when we have this idea and this picture of this thing that we want, it feels really good. But what if we do it or take a step forward and it's not as good as we thought it was going to be, or we fail at it, or we realize we don't want it anymore? And so that is, as long as it just stays there on the shelf and we can look at it and admire it, it's so nice and pretty, and we have something to, that to dream about and hope about. But the minute we take a step in it, now it's real, and that can get really scary for folks as well. Which I don't blame them.
Yeah,
but it will hold you back.
Right. Yeah. Like the fear of killing the dream, which, Christa, I feel like you and I talked about this in our conversation about like, what if it's not, what if I don't realize the thing that
The vision,
I have for this, whatever this is, like, what if that doesn't happen? Or what if I never realized that? Or, what if this has come up with other guests too, of like you said, what if I get to this thing and then I realize I don't want it anymore? Or it doesn't work for me, right? And so there's judgment or fear of judgment that comes with that, not only within yourself, but then also, oh my God, other people are probably going to think I don't know what I'm doing, that I've made a huge mistake. And then, there's this, and then that just kind of like, it snowballs after that, because then you're terrified from taking the next step to get more information of what you could do in addition to what you've already been doing.
And I remember hearing that come up in your episode, Christa, and I thought that was a really interesting part of the discussion about like the fear of what if I never realized my vision. And when I was listening to it, it made me think a little bit about something I fail at times. Is I love the dream. I love like playing in that fairy tale, and then I forget to live in reality. And so it reminds me of, the cliche of it's about the journey, not the destination. But I'm curious on your thoughts of that, because a part of me was almost thinking, well, if we make the thing like I have to reach a certain level, then there's the fear of failure and not getting to that point. But if we want to change course because we want to enjoy something new, there's not a failure if the goal is about like learning and getting to do that thing every day, right? And you don't set yourself up for failure, because it's like I just wanted to, when I made my career switch, it was like I just want to think about and talk about people all day. and I want to read articles about it that's helpful in my work. And whether or not I become Brene Brown or just Jess Wass, who nobody's heard of, right? The goal was just, I want to do this all day, every day. And if I can talk about this, then I'm living the dream. You know, it would be great if I was a bajillionaire too and super famous, cool. But that may not be the goal. So I'm able to enjoy maybe the destination, the journey. So what are your thoughts about that? Then I was like, well, now I'm telling people not to dream too high.
No, I don't think that. I don't receive that. I don't think that that's what you're saying at all. There are like 1,000 thoughts in my head right now. But yeah, I do think that there is something to be said about enjoying the journey. I think I have notes because I think that you mentioned this I think it was the game thinking versus the gap thinking.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what this kind of reminds me of, right? And just like, yeah, I think we don't spend enough time enjoying the process or enjoying the journey because we're so caught up in the next thing. And so, yeah, I think just really being able to be comfortable with just being in the moments as they're coming, you know, and moving in the direction you feel led to be moved in, right? Like where you are intuitively feeling you should go, the things you should do, they're there, and just moving in those directions and not being so hyper focused and tied to an outcome or not realizing or any of those things, but just like being in the moment. I always say this when I'm talking to people, but then I fail to like do it myself a lot of times. Where, you know, Eckhart Tolle talks about like the power of now. And he talks about the reason why people have so much suffering is because there is too much past or too much future and not enough present.
Yeah.
And so that's why people struggle so much, is because we are rarely in the moment we're in. We are always either looking too much behind, or we're never really in the moment. If we spend more time being in the now, that eradicates so much personal suffering that we have. So I feel like if we can really make it a practice to apply that to what we're doing, just how much more free we can feel as we're moving in the direction we want to go in.
Yeah. And I had a conversation with my partner even last night, sort of about that topic, where we just took in our in-laws cat, and she's not the healthiest, and he's been really sad just thinking about, eventual sort of demise. And he asked me, he's like, how do you stay so positive? And I just said, well, if I'm so focused on when she's going to be gone, I'm going to miss the fact that she looks really cute right now sitting in that corner. And I just want to be here in this moment. And that's why we talk about mindfulness and meditation are such important practices. And well, I'm not a meditator, but I try and apply mindfulness in different ways by just reminding myself to be in the present and enjoy where we are right now, because you're absolutely right. It's when we get lost in the past or too lost in the future that's where anxiety comes from.
Yes.
So you're absolutely right, Christa. I love that perspective.
Well, and this conversation brings up a conversation that I had with a colleague a few weeks ago. I knew her as an entrepreneur, but she made the decision to go back and work in-house full-time for someone else. And, we were talking about the feelings of failure that come with that, and the feeling of, am I giving up, and all these things. And she was talking about how she had this realization that, and Jess, you kind of touched on this in your episode about like the career soulmate thing.
Yes.
About how
I love that too.
How it's important to shift the perspective to think about, and I'm just talking about careers, but I think this can be applied to our lives too, is that our lives, our careers can just be seen as a series of projects, right? Like, okay, I'm in this entrepreneurial project right now, right? But maybe there's something else, because we are so much more than this like present shell skin that we see, right? We have so many different interests, passions, gifts, and to try to contain ourselves on one path, doing one thing, or, little offshoots of that thing, like that could be the death of your soul as we speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why not take the perspective of our careers? And like I said, this could be applied to life, but our careers, look at it as a series of projects, as opposed to, oh, this, I failed at this career, this didn't work, I'm not good at this, oh, I failed at that. Instead of looking at it this way, or looking at it at that way, think of it, or seasons, right? Like, what season of your life are you in, or what season is calling you, right? What project is calling you? And so when she mentioned that, I was like, oh, like I really like sat back in my chair, because there was that felt like freedom. That felt like freedom of removing this pressure that I think we put on ourselves to get to the expectation, or to get to the story that someone, some talking head, some expert, someone who is making, millions and millions of dollars doing whatever it is that they're doing, that we've placed that on what it is that we're trying to do. And we are not them, right? Like, our chapters are not their chapters. And so I feel like the more that we can try to adopt that mentality, which we're all saying the same thing, right? Of being in the now, enjoying the journey. But if we can adopt that perspective, which, like I said, that was a shift for me in that conversation, just those words of, think of it as a project or a season that you're in. And all of these things make up your whole like portfolio, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just,
and you know what that reminded me of? As you said that, I was even thinking when I do leadership trainings and manager trainings, and I talk about, micromanagers are the death of us. And that's when someone's trying to control the how you do it, when what they need to be focused on is, what are we trying to do? And that's what clicked for me with that, is like, we're trying to micromanage our own lives and our careers, where if we just focus on what is it that I want to do, and realize the how I do that could be a million different ways, right? And that's like the purpose of having that vision. I call it like the North Star, where you want to go. And there's like multiple paths that you can take. And that's where the idea of there is no career soulmate, in that like there's only one right path. There's multiple paths. So today I'm an entrepreneur. I work for myself. Call me in 3 years. I don't know if I'll be doing it this way. I may have found another way to do the things that I like to do. And that's all cool, right?
Yeah, I really love that concept of looking at it in terms of like a series of projects. I've never considered it that way, but I think that is a really freeing way of looking at it, just in terms of just being able to give yourself permission to, try different things, do different things. And it might be working today, it may not be working tomorrow, and being okay with that. But I think, again, it's separating yourself from the expectations of whoever that's kind of like in and around in your head, or society, or whatever the case, and sidebar, I was also just thinking about the fact that, like, I think I was just saying this to somebody recently. It's like, we spend so much time thinking about what other people are thinking. Other people are thinking the same thing you think. Like, it's just like, what are they going to think? They're like, everybody's caught up in that same, so many people are caught up in that same loop. You know what I'm saying? Other people are so concerned about, and then half the time they're not even thinking about you. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's probably like even a blip on their radar. What
when I tell my clients, Christa, on that, I say, we think that we are a main actor in someone else's play, and we're the tree.
Exactly.
We are so
prop. We're a
prop.
Exactly. But we like talk ourselves into thinking that we are like what we do in our lives and the choices we make, that people are literally on the edge of their seat saying, oh, well, she did this, well, she did. Like, even if there was a sliver of time where people do that, it passes so quick. Even if they did do that, who cares? Secondly, it's so fleeting. That at the end
there's
of the
no
day,
whistle down from Bridgerton here.
Right?
And they're on to the next scandal the next week anyways, to your point.
Right.
Yes.
I veered off a little bit, but
I love that tangent, Christa. It's amazing, because I said that I was on someone else's podcast, and I was like, and I say this with love, no one cares as much as you think they do. They really don't. And like I said, just as you said, Christa, that people are so focused on trying to figure their own stuff out that they can't be worried about their stuff and then what you're doing too, and trying to like do all the psychological, you know, gymnastics of, oh, I wonder what she was thinking when she said that. You know, it's just, it's, again, no one cares. And I mean that with love. They just, they're
love.
more,
No one
they're
cares about
more concerned about trying to
Yes.
get through their day, what they have going on,
Right.
than what you're doing.
Yes, absolutely. Agreed. And so I'm looking over at my notes because I feel like there was something else in Jess's episode and I don't think I wrote it down. Hopefully it'll come back.
We'll get to it. I'm sure it'll come up.
I'm sure we will. So, I mean, and you know, this all kind of dances around the other theme that was a big deal in each of our respective conversations about who we were before the world told us who we should be. And Christa, you did such a beautiful job of leading into that conversation when you were talking about, you know, as you were doing your exploration and thinking about how you used to be more courageous and how somewhere along the way you lost that. And Jess, you know, you talked about it without that kind of prompt lead in. But, you know, when I brought that up at the end of our conversation, I remember you having like an audible and a visible and really like an emotional reaction. And so Christa, I want to start with you though, because that was coming up for you as you were doing your own reflections and, you know, who were you? You know, have you figured out what the thing was that caused you to lose that part of yourself along the way?
You know, Kia, I think I'm still trying to work through that a little bit. I mean, because really at the bottom of all of that is fear, right? But there's veins to that, right? So it's really going back and figuring out like the origin of that, and doing some work around that, which I intend to bring up in my next therapy session. So
it's not here.
Not here. I mean, not that I'm, of course, I can talk too much, but like I'm still trying to like really like peel back all of the layers about it. Because I mean, but it's really fear, and I just think that it's louder now because, like I was saying in the episode, like just because you know I'm about to be 46, and like the things that you should have set up and would have been like, there's a lot more, and it's not like those things weren't true then. They just feel a lot truer and closer now. So I think that is kind of what's kind of hovering. But I think I also said at the same time, that should also be the reason to like do it, you know, to like put yourself all the way out there. It's just like, okay, now like there's more urgency. So you should be more bold, you know, more, you know, willing to continue to do those things and look back on the receipts to see, you know, what you have done before to get you to this, you know, place that you can do the same thing. So I think I'm really just trying to nail down on the veins of it, you know, to see, because there was a quote that came up in my memories, and I'm going to butcher this quote, but the essence of it was like, find out basically, not just know what your demons are, but like find out what they've been feeding on, right? So it's like it's not enough to just identify what it is. What have they been feeding on? And so that came as like, and I saw that because I had posted before we came a reminder. I was like, oh yeah, like that's what I mean about like peeling back the layers and getting deeper into it, because then once you have that revelation, that you have a little bit more knowledge about how to kind of move through it.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Ooh. That I got chills when you shared that, like what's been feeding that demon all these years. Jess, what about you? Because this stopped you in your tracks in our conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, like Christa said, I gotta go to therapy for this, because it's not just ever one thing, right? It's a series of things. But I think it's, you know, there's moments where I realized I should have been doing this work the whole time. I've always been drawn to this work, but I think I took the cues of other people as well in the how, and let people dictate the how, the path of how I was supposed to take all of these strengths and these skills. And it was like, you go to corporate America and you're going to be like CEO someday and you're going to move up the ladders. And that was the way it was dictated to me on like a revenue driving piece of the business. And if I just peeled back and got to the essence, when I got to the essence of the what am I good at? What am I passionate about? And said, there may be multiple ways that I can do that. That's when I found this path. And so I needed to go back to and get in touch with who am I, and not just this version that I was sort of molded into, and losing myself along the way. And, part of that's related to, why I'm passionate about DE&I work, right? Because a lot of this too is in trying to make myself, a biracial woman, fit in and be more palatable and not rock the boat, and not having anyone above me that looked anything like me or anything like, half of my family, and not having those role models. So the role models were the older white men. And so how do I make myself into an older white male? And you lose pieces of you. And when I was younger, I was excited about all of these different pieces of me. And then it became, you have this desire to want to fit in, not to stand out. And now I'm swinging the pendulum the other direction, where I go, no, I don't need to fit in. I feel better when I'm just me, and I can stand out, but I'm not as weird as I think I am. Right?
Yeah, that desire to fit in, which really does tie to our first topic about, the thing that keeps people from taking that step, from sending the email, right? After they've, taken the pause from that introspection, because it's like, ooh, I don't want to look too different if I say these are the things I'm wanting to do or create or whatever that is. But, Christa, you were talking about this just a moment ago, about this whole notion of like, having that urgency. And I will just share, Chris, I know I mentioned it to you, Jess, I haven't mentioned it to you. So my aunt passed away a few weeks ago, and it was, anytime someone dies, it's unexpected, but this was really unexpected. Like literally, her and my mom were texting just about 4 days before she passed away about plans that they were making and preparing. And so, I had already, 2022 has been the first quarter has been like heavy reflection, introspection, kind of mapping out like what season of my life am I in, and what season do I need to shift into now? Like that was already really present for me. But hearing about my aunt passing away, and just like I said, what she was doing just days before, right? And that was kind of like the final, okay, I'm not going to use that metaphor. That was kind of like the final moment for me of like, oh, wow, like life is really short. It's really short. And you think it's not, you think you have this long runway, but those years fly by like that. Like when I was home, for her homegoing celebration, and, sitting with my mom and sister, and, we were playing music, and, there were songs that came out 30 years ago that I still, the minute I hear the first note, I know every single word, right? And it takes me, it transports me right back to that moment. And so you can be, years behind you like that. And that is just a reminder how short life is, and how they're really, not saying that, you want to like put yourself in danger of like living out of your car or anything like that. Obviously there are some levels of risk that you have to take and some bets that you have to make, but that was just a really, really strong reminder in a series of reminders that I had of like, what am I doing? Right? Like what, like these things that I'm thinking of making moves on and shifting, like what's the holdup? Because there is no guarantee that I will be here next week. There is no guarantee that I will be here a month from now or even a day from now. And so I wonder, like, how do we reconcile that need for urgency to make our life, and the visions and the hopes that we have for our life? How do we negotiate that urgency with, all the things that we have to do, all the things that have to be moved in order to bring some of those shifts that we talk about to life, that that honor that person that we were before, all the layers of microaggressions and judgments and, well, you should do this and not that. How do you think we negotiate that urgency?
That's a good question, Kia. I mean, that is a really good reflection point there. And I don't really have anything profound to say to that personally, like, other than just do what you need to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know that, like, that's not, an articulate, well thought out, like, response, but, like, really, sometimes that just is, like we talked about, just like making, like, I know what's in front of me. I know the vision that's there. I know what's in me. So just do the thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to, at some point, just do it. And there's really nothing like huge or profound. It's like really just like, okay, let me just do the thing. It may be uncomfortable. It may not look the way I want, whatever, like removing all expectations and judgments and just showing up in the moment and making the moment happen, and removing, like I said, those are the expectations, and just move in the direction that you feel like you're being led in, because we're always being led in a direction or given some type of like confirmation or given some type of nudge. The point is, are we listening to it? Like, one of the things I say all the time, like to my clients and in general, is like, when you're talking about, like, specifically like your body, like your body is always speaking to you, right? So like our body's always telling you what it needs. The issue is that most of the time we're not listening to it, but trust is always talking. And I think the same thing with your spirit, your intuition, your vision, whatever it is that you want to call it, is doing the same thing. It's a matter of you meeting that moment and saying, okay, I'm going to move in this direction, come what may, because clearly I'm being prodded to do this for a reason. And so if I can just block out my own expectations, fears, judgments, and just do the thing.
Yes.
To Jess's point earlier, once you do it, then more information is available to you.
Right.
More guidance is available to you, but only when you move. Only when you just do something, I think, is when that happens.
Yeah. And sometimes the best answer is just the Nike slogan, right? Just do it. And you're absolutely right. And I think about too, like, whose life are you living? Right. Because so often we're trying to live someone else's fantasy and dream. And, as you pointed out, Kia, we only get one, even if we believe in reincarnation, we only get one version of this life. Right. And so you squander the chance or you don't, right? So you just have to get really clear. I think a lot of people don't take the time to get clear on what they want. And I think we all saw this in 2020 when the world slowed down. I said it was like musical chairs and the music went off. Everyone looked around and they're like, how did I get here? I didn't even know I was playing this game. And it gave people that moment to reflect on, what is it that I actually want? Because I'm in this weird situation, up is down and down is up. And for some reason, it created that moment, that silence where the world stopped. People could listen, to your point, Christa, to their bodies, their minds, and what it was telling them. And a lot of people are like, I got the heck out of here, right? Whether it was leave their job, leave their small New York City apartment, whatever the case may be, it was like, I have to get out of here and do something different, because this isn't what I want. I just was sleepwalking and ended up here. And I don't want to be here anymore, because I realize I haven't been happy. I've just been feeling nothing, I guess. And I want to feel something. So I think that's what's really powerful, is like, take that time to figure out what is it that you really want. And then just do it, as Christa said.
And allow
Just do
yourself
the
to
thing.
want it too. I think
Yeah.
that's also,
I
you
was
have
just
to
going to
allow
say
yourself
that.
to want
Yes.
it too.
Yes.
Is that I think, because I've done that exercise too
Mhm.
for myself and then with people I work with, in terms of just like, okay, what is like, create your ideal life.
Mhm.
If you could just literally wave a magic wand and have this, like how you want to feel when you wake up in the morning, how you want to feel throughout your day, the things you want to be doing with no judgment about like, this is not realistic. I
Right.
can't, like removing all of that and literally just placing yourself there
Mhm.
to discover, like you said, just to get clear on what it is you want, because you can feel that vibration of that.
Yes.
But you
Yes.
have to allow yourself to want those things
Yes.
too. I think that's a struggle point for a lot of people too. It's like getting caught up in the, I may want this, but can I really have it? And
Right.
not literally just
Yes.
seeing yourself there. So you can at least identify that's what you want. And then you can figure out some steps, but you start with what would feel good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That two things I want to say about that. This was now this isn't how Courage Permission Slip originated, but there was a prompt that my coach had given me, I don't know, like a year or so ago. And it was, give yourself permission to want what you want, right? Like this whole, like we, and I would argue that I think at an individual's core, they do know what they want, but then they argue for all the limitations. And as Les Brown says, when you argue for your limitations, you get to keep them.
Right.
If you're like, oh, but what about this? But then this is going to happen. Then yes, then that's what's going to happen.
Mhm.
Then that's you are welcoming that in because you keep arguing for them. You keep creating space for these things. And so, but if you stop making that argument, right, of like, if you stop being the, the defendant for your limitations, then you can allow in the things that actually want to be there, right? Like you can remove those things, as you said earlier, like you can remove the things that those demons, the shadows, the saboteurs have been feeding on, right? And I think, but we, because we are wired for negativity bias, right? It's hard for us to remove that, but this, like many things, is a muscle, right? Like, and a question, so this was the second thing that I was going to mention with relation to this, is one of my favorite coaching questions to ask is, if time and money and other people's opinions, the three, like the holy trinity of things that hold people back, if time, money, and other people's opinions did not matter, and you knew it would work out, what would you do? Right? Like, I would, okay, stay on that path. Don't bring in, the limitations, the limiting beliefs, the, oh, but this. Just stay in the energy of the what. Stay in the energy of the what you are trying to welcome in. And then when you do that, that's when the inspiration and the ideas and the messages that have probably been in front of you the entire time can now, they take on a different shape for you. And then you can be like, oh, that's the thing. That's it. Okay, I'm gonna pursue that little bunny trail. Does that resonate with you all?
Oh yeah. And it reminds me, it reminds me of this, very simple fact that, like, if we want change, then we have to make a change.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where a lot of people get stuck as well, which is like, I know what I want. And to your point, Kia, and I can see all the things that I'm doing that aren't helping, but I'm going to sit on the defense end instead of the prosecution, right? And just say, yes, I know I should change these things, but I'm not going to. Okay, then you won't get change.
Right.
You cannot get change unless you make change. So if you don't want to make change, then we will just remain here. And that's your choice, right? But note that it's a choice.
Yes.
Note that it is a choice. Absolutely.
That's it.
And I think also just being like more solution minded, like I think it's easy to like think, like you said, think about like the limitations of like being solution oriented, I'm saying, like thinking about like thinking in terms of, okay, how can I get this thing? You know what I'm saying? Like, instead of like the other, it's like, okay, this is what I want. Like, what are some ways I can actually do this? Like, spending some time there. But I think that's the thing that people forget, or they don't spend. Like, you see the thing and they're like, oh, it's too big, or I can't. It's like, okay, no, like, first admitting that you want the thing, and then being like, okay, what are some ways that I can actually do this? Because I feel like once you put that vibration out there, then like the helpers and all of the things start to come, because then you've signaled to the universe, okay, well, they're serious about this. So let's put some things together, to help this along, right? And so I think, learning how to make that pivot, that switch of, what can't, but like what is actually possible, what solutions are in front of me, what resources do I have, what help, is available, like all of those things. And then, like I said, pulling back your receipts about, other times where you have done things and gotten to where you, are currently sitting. You've done things to get where you are right now. So what's the problem? You know what I'm saying? Like, you clearly have it in you to do it. So I'll keep applying that.
Yes. Let go of the limitations. And to what you were just saying, Christa, and I heard this on a podcast, but I've had coaches that have mentioned this too, of if you have an idea, so if you're listening, this is a prompt to get out a pen and paper. If there's something that you want, but you're not sure of the hows, make a list of 50 to 100 ways that you can get that thing. And again, like, throw caution into the wind. It could be, ridiculous, right? So if you were I want to make $100,000 by the end of the year, just making this up, right? What are 50 to 100 ways you could get it? You could, or I could, just putting this in the first person. Oh, well, I could stumble across a lost bag of money. I could get an inheritance. I could win the lottery. I could, and just doing that. And when you do that, I mean, that's like, as you said, Christa, it just shifts the vibration, because not only does it like signal to the universe, you are like trying to move heaven and earth to make it happen, but also you're probably laughing at some of the insane ways that you're coming up with to make this money, right? And all of that opens the door for possibility and ideas and inspiration to come your way. Because you're probably not going to find a armored heist bag, but you
never know.
But I was about to say,
you don't keep your eyes open, you'll never find it. Looking at your phone when you're walking, you'll never see it.
In doing that though, maybe there's an offshoot of that idea that's legal, right? And you can get closer to that goal. But I love the ask of making a list of like all the ways, right? Like, remove logic from it, all the different ways that you can get that thing that you're seeking.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna do that myself. I actually like that exercise.
Yeah. It's fun. I've done it a couple times and it's like, oh yeah. Oh, but inevitably in doing that, I did have some crazy things that came up, but in doing that, other ideas came to me and I started thinking about the helpers. I was like, oh, you know who does this though? So-and-so. I'm going to send them an email and ask if I can chat with them for a minute. But but in doing that exercise, that's what you open the door for.
Right. But it puts you in the position to help yourself. Right?
Yes.
Versus the throwing up walls and obstacles.
Right.
But it starts with giving yourself permission to want that thing that you've secretly said that you wanted, but saying it out loud. And Christa, you talked about the power of saying it out loud, even if it's to yourself. That shifts everything around you. And then it's real. And then there's something that you probably need to do about it. Yeah. Ladies, this was so much fun. I am so thankful to the two of you again for being willing to sit in on and participate in this experiment. Thank you both for being willing participants in this.
Thanks, Kia. This is great.
Thanks for thinking of us and including us and putting us together.
Absolutely, absolutely. My pleasure. And I will share Christa and Jess's information in the show notes so that you can follow them on social media, connect with them at their websites, and learn more about the fabulous work that they are doing. But that is it for this debut episode of Courage Permission Slip After Hours. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are finding us on YouTube, please make sure that you like and subscribe to this channel so that you can be alerted when new episodes are available. And if you found us on your favorite podcast platform, please, please, please be sure to rate and review this episode so that you can make it easier for other people to find and enjoy this content as well. That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. And until the next time, talk to you soon. Bye.